welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our King Kong retrospective with the 1967 film King Kong Escapes. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So a warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire, with some new Rise from Fire songs up just this month. Say hello.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
And for the last time, I am the eighth wonder of the world.
The eighth wonder. This is indeed the end of the Kong retrospective. I feel as wistful about it as I did when we said goodbye to Amicus, because it was a beloved subject, and the retrospective had to come to an end somewhere. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from the other beloved Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hola, hola.
Hola. Okay. King Kong Escapes. And let me just say, by the way, I have a cold. I'm sorry. I know it's making my voice sound strange, so let's just go with that. King Kong Escapes, which came out in Japan as Counterattack of King Kong in 1967. It's a Japanese-American science fiction kaiju film with King Kong and also a giant robot King Kong. It was co-produced by Toho and Rankin Bass. Rankin Bass. The film is directed by Ishiro Honda, special effects by Eiji Tsuburaya, and stars Rhodes Reason, Linda Miller, Akira Takarada, Mie Hama of You Only Live Twice, and Eisei Amamoto. The film was a loose adaptation of the Rankin Bass Saturday morning cartoon show, The King Kong Show, and it was the second and final Japanese-produced film featuring King Kong. Came out in Japan, July 22, 1967, and then a year later, it came out in the United States, June 19th, 1968. And Tony, we were going to talk about Linda Miller and her voice, and so here's how she knows what she knows, is she lived in Japan at the time. Okay. Opening thoughts.
Industry, actually, of who are Americans who get to be Americans in Japan.
Yeah.
And you'll see them, usually they're really not that good. She's pretty good. I've seen a lot of modern ones where they just get a guy. In fact, I tangentially knew a guy who's in like a couple of things because he could play, in one he played blonde boyfriend of a, Japanese actress. And so they're like, hey, you're a thin blonde guy. You look pretty cool. Be thin blonde guy in this, He's a cool dude. He did a good job, but you'll see a lot of sports guys who kind of retire and do stuff, and a lot of them are really terrible, like in the Devilman movie. But there's a whole, if you could just manipulate it just right, you can actually get some work.
Well, Linda Miller,
very limited work.
We should save it till we get there. But yeah, there is a whole story about how it is that she wound up in Japan and starring in this movie and having the kind of crazy late 60s adventure that she did.
And being dubbed.
Right, the whole story of what she thought about the movie itself, but she was a busy performer in 67. Okay, let's get our opening thoughts on this film, and we'll switch it up a little bit from last week. Tony, you're still the Toho King, so let's go Tony, Drew, and then Julia, and then I'll say something else. So lay it on us. What are your opening thoughts on King Kong Escapes?
I really like this movie. I hadn't seen it in a while. Again, I guess probably I saw the cartoon in reruns, and it wasn't on that often. So I liked it, and I'd seen Mecha-Godzilla, so watching these with my stepbrothers and Kong versus Mecha-Kong, that was pretty awesome. If I had kids, these are the movies that I would be showing my kids all the time, because this is great fun. It's definitely an adventure flick. You can trace it back a little bit to, submarine epics of the time.
Mm-hmm. You mean like Ice Station Zebra and stuff like that?
Well,
and
more like
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, yeah. Stuff like that, which is really cool. Sci-fi, anything with sci-fi and submarines.
Yeah.
It's action adventure. There's a cool cast. Kong, tears it up with some monsters at the beginning. Yeah, it's got a great villain. Yeah, I really like it. The supporting cast is great as well as the rest of the cast. I have a couple nitpicks which I'll save for later. But I really dug the movie.
Excellent. Let's see. Who do we say? Okay, Drew. What are your opening thoughts? King Kong Escapes.
Well, this is the kind of 60s. I don't like long hair hippie 60s. Like, I like the sort of crazy mod 60s that we see here. And this really has kind of like an early Marvel Comics vibe to me. Like, it reminded me a lot of like something Jack Kirby and Stan Lee might have done in the Fantastic Four during the 60s. So I really like the feel of this movie a lot. It's just a lot of fun. I think the Kong suit in here is a big, he still looks a little goofy, still looks a little cartoonish, but the face is a lot more emotive than the sort of Rumpelstiltskin looking Kong in Kong versus Godzilla. And Mecha-Kong is just really cool looking. I like the monster battles. I like the fact that they actually kind of get into a different kind of monster battle with them climbing up a tower. I think that's really clever and made use of the fact that you're actually having gorillas. So like there's a lot to like in this, and I think in some respects I actually think I kind of like it a little more than King Kong versus Godzilla, which I know may be a little almost like heresy to some, but it's been a long time since I've seen this, and I've never, I think, watched them so close together. So I just really just got a nice chuckle out of this. This is like a really fun, old school Japanese monster movie.
Fabulous. Julia, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I almost feel like I'm gonna have to talk about it to really, really process what my thoughts are. I think it's silly, but I get a big kick out of the fact that it's Rankin Bass, just because I'm such a big fan of Rudolph, and I love that the voice of what's his name? What's his name? It's not Jägermeister. It's like what's his name?
Talking about Doctor Who?
The guy who's
you're talking about Burgermeister Meisterburger.
That's it. Burgermeister Meisterburger. He voiced him. Anyway, so that's kind of fun to hear his voice. And then the actor who plays Doctor Who is really funny, and I wish I could hear him speak in Japanese and understand him. Or, I'm assuming he's Japanese. I don't know. But anyway, it would be interesting because he's so interesting to look at when he's acting. I don't know, it's silly, and it's kind of fun because it's silly, like especially the effects, because everything is so obviously in miniatures, and I don't know, but so I think that's. I don't know that I don't like that it's silly. I think it's actually really fun to watch for that reason.
So my feeling is that it's a very silly movie. It's obviously a family movie. It's not a kids movie per se, because you have people getting crushed to death and bleeding out of their mouths and people are getting shot, but it's clearly like aimed at like a multi-generational audience. It's absurd, but it holds up. It doesn't get boring. It's more or less internally consistent. It's fast. It has some very clever ideas. It has an interesting King Kong. I have all kinds of problems with it, but this is. I agree with you. At first blush, people might not want to say it, but this is a better movie than King Kong versus Godzilla. This is because this is a sort of rip-roaring, blatant rip-off of, as Tony talked about, major spy and like light sci-fi stuff like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and James Bond and Man from U.N.C.L.E. and other groovy stuff that was happening at the time that this movie was made. And it just happens to have King Kong in it. It is so full of wonderful spy movie cliches that I just found it delightful. I mean, it's impossible to take this movie seriously. Although I do have a serious question about at least one thing, which we'll get to. So let's get into it. First off, you know what? We wanted to talk a little bit about Linda Miller, who is. I know this is not the most important thing, but I want to start with this, and then we'll talk about where we find her. So Tony, you were mentioning Linda Miller, who plays the nurse on the submarine that we find at the beginning. And as we talk about her, we'll just go into the beginning of this movie. But basically, the movie opens up on a research submarine. So Linda Miller was one of these people who she was 5'1" and American, and she happened to get a gig like modeling for magazines or something like that. And she went to Japan, and she found out that she could have a gangbusters career in Japan because although she was an American, she wasn't so shockingly different from all of the Japanese models that she like stood out like crazy. Instead, she just looked
But
like because she was Japanese height, basically, was
but
what it
she's
came down to.
blonde,
But she was
and
blonde, right?
that does make, like, as weird as it sounds, and no joke, a lot of times that made a difference.
Blonde-ish. I mean, her hair was darker than it is in this movie, but yeah,
Yeah.
you're well. She's totally Caucasian. She is an obvious like I don't know if she really was, but she's an obvious like sorority girl, little tiny little upturned button nose, big Western eyes, but she's tiny. She's the height of like other models were in Tokyo, so she could be in a neat sort of array with other models, and she could kind of be an accent piece. And so she was getting lots and lots and lots of work. But the reason why she has such a weird voice in this movie is that, and her voice is truly strange, is she was a model. So when she got hired to do this movie, she didn't, uh, she didn't have the right under any kind of actor's contract to make sure that her voice was hers or to go back and re-record it like the American actor did who she was starring opposite. She's there to be a face. And so once her filming was done, they left it to be recorded. And Julia, you were shocked to hear the voice that comes out of this woman, weren't you?
Well, no, actually, I thought that it matched because they're both American. But then I found out that she was actually dubbed by somebody else. And then, it's a funny voice, but it doesn't seem mismatched to the actress. That, and also the person who dubs her also dubs the other actress, the Asian actress, as well.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's why she's changing her voice so much. Well, that makes sense. That actually does make sense. So, this movie begins right. It begins in this on board a nuclear submarine that is on a research mission, and we are clearly Drew. You're the Kong sort of historian. We are in a whole nother universe now, aren't we?
Well, yeah, I mean, this doesn't even appear to have any ties to King Kong versus Godzilla. I mean, they're talking about Kong like it's basically the same setup as we've seen in a lot of these Kong origin pics, where they're saying like there is this legend of Kong on this island, and he's the strongest thing in the world, and he's 60 feet tall. So I guess
Right.
unlike King Kong versus Godzilla, they actually give us a height.
Right.
What's interesting about this movie and King Kong versus Godzilla is that Honda, was the director of the original Godzilla movie and was a big fan of the original King Kong. And what's really great to see here is he does actually get to stage some of the stuff
Oh, good point.
from King Kong. Like you do have him fight they call it Gorosaurus, but you basically have Kong fight a T-Rex. And
Yeah.
I think Honda must have just been delighted to actually be able to get some of those familiar Kong beats into this movie, because that fight scene to me is probably the most lively thing in a very, 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 very lively movie.
It's it does really keep moving. I love the sort of excuses that are going on. So when we open up, we found the Captain Nelson, who runs the submarine, and his main lieutenant, who is now I'm searching for the name of the lieutenant. Yeah, Jiro. So Nelson and Jiro are basically they're supposed to be out looking for minerals, but on their way there, they are just studying the fauna of this local island because they're both really interested in King Kong, which gives them an excuse to be talking about King Kong when Susan, their doctor, or I guess she's a nurse, comes on board and says some nurse things. And that just sets up in the very first scene, we're on an international submarine. We're doing studies. We both know about King Kong, and that way, as soon as it happens that they have engine problems and they have to stop at this island, they're ready to meet King Kong.
Well, what's interesting to me about the island here is we're going through yet another like for some reason Toho always stayed away from the Skull Island name.
Yeah.
But they don't even consider. You're asking about it being a different universe. I mean, in King Kong versus Godzilla, it's Pharaoh Island.
Yes.
Here, it's Mondo Island. Of course, there is a throwaway bit of dialogue that Kong travels between different islands in this area. So maybe
you're right. That's true.
Maybe they're all three of those islands are there, and Kong is just hanging out on whichever one strikes his fancy that week.
Well, I mean, one obvious thing that we should have said, and I think we made mention of very briefly, is that really the reason this is in a totally different universe is this is an adaptation of a cartoon that had its own continuity. And I'm trying to think, it'd be like if, even though that Justice League movie is coming out very soon from DC, it'll be, if the following year they did a brand new live action movie, but it was based on the old Paul Dini, turn of the century Paul Dini Justice League series, and all the continuity was different and everybody was different. And by the way, I would watch the hell out of that movie. That would be.
I wish that they were making that movie instead of the one we're gonna get.
Yeah, no, I know. Now that I say it out loud, part of me is back behind this conversation, just feeling sad about the whole thing. But yeah, the other really interesting thing here, it was called Mondo Island. On the show, so that's it. They've just lifted. Doctor Who is from Mondo Island. Susan is from the Kong show. Mecha-Kong is from the Kong show. The one that's not is the stuff that is ripped off from James Bond and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, because Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was a spy show that took place on a submarine, basically, and it starred. It was a guy called Admiral. Yeah, it was pure adventure show, but there's a lot of spy stuff, and sometimes there was some Lost in Spacey kind of alien invasion.
Well, there was also a movie with Peter Lorre.
Totally, yeah. There was the movie first. It was by Irwin Allen, the guy who made The Towering Inferno. And then they did a TV series that ran for like 4 or 5 years that starred Richard Basehart and David Hedison. And it's basically Star Trek just a couple of years before Star Trek and Under the Ocean. But the way that they behave on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea has been lifted completely and plopped into this movie. And by that I mean Richard Basehart's as Admiral Nelson on that show, his word was law, and it wasn't just law on the submarine, it was law on Earth. And that's what's going on here. We have, once again, Japan has created in these movies this idea of a United Nations that is not just a partnership of nations, but is literally its own world government with its own navy and its own army and a federal type of law that supersedes local law, so that any one of these dudes on Nelson's craft can get out and walk up to an army lieutenant and say, "I'm from the UN. We need and we need a sniper right here." And the army lieutenant goes, "Yes, sir." That's the way that in the Toho movies, Japan seems to say, we want the world to go. We want the world to go towards a world government that will control everything. And I can't help but think that's, they're saying, which would be a hell of a lot better than us having to worry about either the Americans or the Russians at this point. But it's fascinating to me. It's really fascinating to see this sort of alternate universe UN. Because the UN, just so we know, the UN does not have a navy. This is all made up stuff. It's all just sort of it is the science fiction of this film, besides the giant robot Kong. So yes, they go to Mondo Island. They have a groovy hovercraft that they ride I don't even remember why they're going to the island. Does anybody remember like why they decided?
They're doing their random research maneuvers, I believe, but like ultimately that doesn't really matter because the captain and his lieutenant are basically Kirk and Spock are obsessed with King Kong and want to go check out this island, and like they've even drawn up pictures of Kong.
Yes.
Don't they have to go get X? Isn't it that they have to go get element X?
No, they don't need element X.
No, Element
that's
X.
Doctor
That's
Who.
all in Team Doctor Who. That's all his thing. They're just doing research stuff, and they happen to.
And Kong, when we meet Kong, he gets into a fight with as you mentioned, a T-Rexy kind of thing, a kangaroo hopping Gorosaurus that is really one of the cutest dinosaurs ever to show up in a Toho picture. He has these giant eyes, and it's a fun fight. Did you see Drew, I thought sometimes that Kong's face, actually, believe it or not, from a distance, Kong's face does look like some of the still shots of Kong from the silent one. The sort of longer face that Kong had. I thought they were working hard to try to create, a recognizable Kong.
I think this Kong is a big improvement over the last Toho Kong. Like he's his hands alone, because like the hands on the previous Kong, look stiff. They're unconvincing. And frankly, like I know a lot of people enjoy the electrical powers in King Kong versus Godzilla. I think that's a really strange idea, and I'm kind of glad that they've done away with that.
Also, it comes to nothing. It doesn't really amount to much. But
the thing is, for me, the electrical powers were needed for him to beat Godzilla. Just like here, he needs for robot King Kong to be made super flimsily so that as soon as he falls off the Tokyo Eiffel Tower, he just breaks apart in the air. I mean, otherwise he has no chance.
We'll get to that.
I think you could make a version of King Kong that could stand up to Godzilla that doesn't need just make him really strong, for crying out loud. Like make him really strong and make him smarter because he's an ape. Like like the electrical powers to me have always been a little odd, and I know that's because Japanese monsters are to a different wavelength. But I definitely prefer this version of Kong, not just aesthetically, because he looks a lot better. Although when he does wail on Gorosaurus, he really just.
I love all the
wails
monster
on
battling.
him.
Yeah, the monster battling in this is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Kong tears up Gorosaurus, he fights a sea monster.
Yeah.
His fights with Mecha-Kong are not as good as the earlier fights.
Yeah. No, you're well, some of the funniest stuff is going on early here. Like so he meets up with Susan, and he's intrigued with Susan, and then while Kong is distracted by Gorosaurus, the three of them hightail it back to the sub, and that gives you the funniest business in the whole picture, because Kong sort of quickly dispatches a sea monster. That's no biggie. And then he looks at that sub, and he's like...
With a big giant rock that he throws at it. It's hilarious.
He looks at the sub, and he's like, I know that girl's in there. And he starts like shaking it. It was so... It's really... this is like the stuff where Toho suddenly is kind of thinking like a kid, and there's just these real feelings of warmth and humor with this giant ape sort of tossing this toy submarine around like you would if you were a kid, to the point where then the girl has to come out and she talks to him like he's a kid, like he's a little boy. She comes out and in this, just take it for granted, in this universe, King Kong understands English and has really excellent hearing.
Yeah.
She goes...
I have a really hard time with that, by the way.
Okay, well, let's talk about that in a sec. But she goes, Kong, stop shaking the ship. And he does, and he listens to her. It's sweet. The whole thing is like overrun with this crazy... Yeah, go ahead.
It's a shame that they've dubbed this character with such a an obnoxious voice, because if she'd had just a normal speaking voice, she would probably be one of the more progressive heroines that we've seen in this, because she actually, Kong picks her up the first time, but she actually kind of takes it upon herself to tell Kong what to do.
All the time.
She's not a passive victim the way all the other Kong heroines we've seen really.
She has tremendous
are.
agency. Absolutely. No, her agency's all over the place, and she comes up with most of the solutions for what goes on in here,
That was sad, because at first I thought she was going to be like the captain of the ship.
Right.
Then she has called and, hey, Lieutenant, blah blah blah. I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
But it's the '60s, you can.
Oh yeah.
What you can expect. But I was at first really like, whoa, okay, cool. I'd forgotten about this. I mean, she's still a lieutenant, which, that's still cool.
And honestly, kudos on them for having an interracial couple in a 1960s movie.
Oh, yeah.
But,
No, there's lots of stuff like that. At first, like I said, I was like, oh man, this is really, like, pretty awesome. She's like Captain of the Submarine.
She's fabulous. I mean, yeah, no, Nelson, the hunky white dude is the captain, but yeah, he also is sexless. I mean, he's basically, he treats everybody as his underlings.
True. I think he's intended to be the sort of the romantic interest for the
Madam
Asian
Madam
boss
X.
lady.
Yeah. But you're right about there's still a lot of like 60s just sort of ingrained sexism going on. Like when they're in front of the UN later, and the UN's like, "Why does Kong take an interest in Dr. Susan?" And he's like, "Well, because look at her."
I mean, just look at her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Kong is a male, and look at her. Just look at her.
For the love of God, man. But
I will say that also in the way that it's filmed as a family movie, maybe it is her being a model. I'm not sure, but it does feel like sometimes they still saw it as, she would be in a beach movie if this was a beach movie.
Right.
And I think it's kind of approached that way, which is a shame because there's lots of cool stuff that.
Although now we need to add to all the fake movies and comics that we're making Skull Island Beach Party.
Oh man.
Skull Island Beach Party.
With some rocking surf guitar and Kong doing the Watusi.
Well, yeah, and can you picture like Doctor Who and Madam X are like flipping burgers over there, and Doctor Who's got this groovy hat.
No. What would happen in this movie, and these are the tangents we live for, is there has to be a surf contest. Doctor Who has a surfboard that obviously has some kind of robotic thing, and it's got to have one of those stupid spinny satellite dish things that people love at the time. And it can control, so Madam X is on it. It's really being controlled by Doctor Who, and something, of course, wrong. And like, it was a robot surfboard you can't have possibly won. And that's how that works, by the way, this movie. It writes itself if you think about it being set at that time.
Oh, yes. Okay,
so coming soon from COH Pictures, Skull Island Beach Party.
One day we are going to have to write all of these, right? Like, you have to.
Well, what we are going to do, and if any of our listeners is actually listening to this part, we are going to do our story collection, which is going to be gathered this summer. So that's going to happen. That's the only time I'm going to mention this. So,
but if we have to, like, should Lava Shark make a story appearance? I'm not.
Dude, you should totally write that. Yes, I
don't know what it
agree.
is yet. But anyway, we should catalog at some point all of our COH Productions movies.
I agree. Okay, so let's talk about Doctor Who and Madam X. So the bad guys are introduced. We've just met the good guys and Kong. And we've shown that Susan has a relationship with Kong and he will listen to her. And because it's a family movie, that relationship is played very much like a kid and it's Sprocket and Chim Chim in a way. I mean, she treats Kong as the world's most enormous pet, basically, and he totally listens to her completely. He is completely devoted to her instantly.
It's pretty badass that I think that this movie really has some strong women, because in all the other movies, the blonde is the damsel in distress of Kong, but she's never that here. She's always just kind of like almost his, like you're saying, his owner or whatever. And then the same goes for, would you say her name is Madam X? No, what's her name?
Madam X or Madam Piranha.
Madam Piranha.
Madam Piranha.
Madame
Madam
Piranha should be a rave like electronica DJ name. Like somebody needs it.
That is a great name. You're right. Yeah, or a stripper would also work. Anyway, she's great because she's the boss of Doctor Who. I mean, she actually, he eventually betrays her, of course, as they always do. But
well, explain them because we're there. Who are these two bad guys? It's Madam X and Doctor Who. So who are they and what are they up to, Joya?
Well, I mean, so at first she's kind of, just playing the part of a reporter, kind of at the UN press conference that they're doing. And then she calls in and she's, reporting back to Doctor Who, and then you kind of get to find out that she's in charge. She's the boss of him. And I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I just think that for this time period, like you were saying, Drew, about how, it's something to see them have an interracial relationship, I also think it's something to see them have a kind of a female, mega, like villain or whatever. And then she's a villain with a heart of gold, basically, because when he starts talking about killing people, she's like, oh, okay, no, that's not so much where I wanted to go with this.
I want to know
really
who
like
Madam X actually works for, though, because they kept saying, like, well, I represent a certain country.
Yeah, I want to talk about that specifically, in fact, because, and we can talk about her whole arc. So she starts out, Doctor Who is this super villain that she has. He is Doctor Who like Dr. No, basically. It's another James Bondianism. But Doctor Who is a supervillain that she has hired to harvest this chemical, this element that will help her have world power for her government. Basically, they're going to make weapons of some kind. She says, "My country, my country, my country." She never names what country she's from. Later on, when it all gets too dangerous and lots of people are going to die, she says, "We never wanted that kind of incident." And so she has a change of heart, and she doesn't want to go through the plans. She doesn't want innocent people to die. I watched this whole thing thinking at any moment that it was going to turn out that she was an alien, like in the first King Ghidorah movie, Monster Zero.
Awesome that she's like the spy. She's like Madame Hydra or anything, and
right.
She wears the coolest 60s fashions all the time.
Oh, she changes all the time. She changes between scenes. So
that's why I was saying before, I want her and Volnavia from Dr. Fives and name it all the mod.
Well, and Susan changes all the time too.
Susan, yeah.
I want all the mod villains to form some kind of like super force. Badass women.
You'd be the mod squad, like of supervillains.
But like all these, like the way they talk about Force 5, or the way the women from Kill Bill kind of form up. But this mod 60s villainous spy team of women changing clothes and going to cool places, Morocco, and messing stuff up. That would be amazing. I want that movie too. But yeah, no, Madam X is awesome.
Yeah, and we never knew. Like I say, she didn't turn out to be an alien, which I thought would happen.
We know she's not Japanese because they make a big business of saying, "I don't think any of these people are actually Japanese." So,
yeah, he goes, "You're not Japanese, and you're not Chinese, you're not Vietnamese, right?"
And considering that World War II is recent memory. I think that that's the reason why they were very specific to include that dialogue in there. But is she supposed to be working for the Russians? It is really weird to me.
I think I know what she is. I mean, I thought about this a lot, and I think the deal is, because she is the one who is causing all the trouble, but in the end she has a change of heart. I think she's supposed to be what the rest of us are, like what we should want to be. Like Americans, you can trust the Americans and the Russians to make terrible decisions. But, here is a model character who comes from an international, from a country that has a world footprint and that has thought about the consequences of her actions and has had second thoughts and changed her mind. I think they deliberately don't name what country it is because we're supposed to go, that could be America or that could be Russia, and that's what we should demand of the people. Especially when you consider what tremendous trauma the United States put Japan through. I watch these things all the time, and they've got air raid sirens all over these, and I keep going, Jesus Christ, nobody relives their trauma the way the Japanese do. It's really strange that they're constantly going back to these
I don't know. I
images.
think everybody does. We were having this conversation when we were watching it. Is I think everybody relives the trauma. I think we all spend all of our time going, how is what I'm doing right this minute being affected by some trauma I experienced when I was a child or when I was a teenager? I just think that's pretty. I think it's really neat that they incorporate it into the films. But I mean, it's certainly the case.
Okay, first of all, am I wrong?
Is
the kaiju film a sort of exciting reliving of Japan's national trauma? That's number one. Is that bullshit?
Well, I don't think that's
true?
even really. I don't think that's even really. When we did the Godzilla movies, I don't think it's even really open to debate. Like I think Godzilla, at least the first one, is certainly that. This is an echo of an echo of that, because that first Godzilla movie is really dark.
Yeah.
Like, this movie's really fanciful and fun, and it's pretty far removed from what Godzilla is, and that's okay. But I mean, it's that stuff is still all in here.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I liked how you said that it's an echo of an echo, and that's okay. That is an interesting idea. This idea that great trauma can eventually, sort of like a poor copy, can eventually become a shadow, but it's not a negative thing. It's not like, oh, look, it's a shadow of its former self, but rather it's more like it's an echo where you can go, if you look carefully, you can still see traces of this distant trauma. That's really interesting. I mean, there's something almost Gerardian, something violence and the sacred about that. This sort of, we carry around these memories and we reenact them. I'm fascinated by that. Wow.
Another read I've heard, and I don't know, I'm not an expert. Tony can correct me. He can say, no, that analysis is bullshit. But something else I've heard about the Japanese, the kaiju, costumed monster movies of this time period also kind of have their roots in kabuki theater, and I don't know if that's true or not, but it is interesting to think about.
No, I think it's possible. Again, I'm still an American, and I've read more than I guess a lot of people. I think that possibly comes about in the acting in a suit. Maybe some of the musical cues. I think that's a little bit further, but like anything in the way that movies are influenced by theater, original theater, I think I can see it, but I also think that's a little bit further. I don't know. I don't know if I buy that all the way.
It's not my analysis. I bring it up only because Jason's talking about maybe where the roots of this come from.
I can see where that comes from, and certainly in the 54 way it's shot, you can see a lot of theatrical aspects to it. The way someone would approach, how am I going to play being a monster and moving like that and everything. I see where they're coming from. I mean, by the time we reach late 60s and 70s Kong, I think that's definitely out the window. It's its own kind of adventure movie and that kind of stuff.
The other thing about this, though, is because this is King Kong, same thing with King Kong versus Godzilla. This is a Japanese regurgitation of an American character. It's not the same thing Godzilla is, whereas Godzilla is an original character and does have a whole lot of stuff wrapped up in it. King Kong, though, predates Godzilla, and it was one of the things that influenced Godzilla. So this is even though it has all the traditions and feels of a Japanese monster movie, this also is a King Kong movie. So it has certain things in it, like the girl that that he has to put in his hand, and the end of the movie, he climbs something, because that's what happens in a King Kong movie. So like, this is interesting to me because it's both like the Japanese monster, and all the stuff the Japanese monster movie and all the stuff that entails, but it's also a King Kong movie, and it has to hit certain notes. Although interestingly, this movie has way less natives in it than any of the other movies we've watched.
Oh, yes.
Like they pare down the natives to just one guy, which was crazy when you think about every other movie, including Kong Skull Island. Just has these crazy native cultures in it. This is just one guy who's basically, his function is to show up, tell him the creature's name is King Kong, and then he gets shot by Doctor Who to show that Doctor Who is really a bad guy.
Yeah. Oh man, Doctor Who's ruthless.
Yes.
I'd forgotten about that scene. Hey, and how crazy is it too that with this much shooting, that this is a G-rated film now?
Oh yeah, that makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah, that's what
And the
Jason
fact
said
that
too.
when Kong pummels Gorosaurus into submission, Gorosaurus is literally like vomiting up salt.
Sure.
Yeah, but still, even with that, it's like, oh, monster violence. But like, Doctor Who
spits up blood like Quint at the end of Jaws. He's like going, blah, blah. I mean, that's like, you can't do that in a PG rated in a G rated movie. That makes no sense. You know what's G rated?
Well, I don't think you could do it G rated now, but this would be a PG or PG-13 if this came out now.
I guess.
Well, I think it's G. I don't know.
PG. It'd be PG. You could not have this level of violence in a G-rated movie. You couldn't.
Oh, no.
It's not today. Not.
But it's listed as G even now. Like, they didn't change the rating.
That's true. I don't know how that works. I don't know I don't think it ever happens that they go back and reevaluate films. But it's a good question. I don't know. Wow. But yeah, it's definitely disturbing.
When they create Kong, though, I love the original Mecha-Kong before he has a meltdown, where he has like this thing of grenades that he's throwing down, like explosives, which I guess we never really see. He's not going around attacking Kong with grenades.
That's a good point. Yeah. He only wears them early in the movie.
Well, let's be fair to Mecha-Kong. All right. So Doctor Who is basically mad scientist for hire. He built this to do one thing, which is dig for this element. He didn't build it to like get in fight. I'd say, considering the fact that this is like basically a very interesting drilling apparatus, he fares pretty well.
Yeah, so that's why he doesn't have the bombs or the dynamite or whatever, is because they were intended specifically for the mining. They weren't just for him to have all the time. He's not Rambo.
That's a shame. If I was if you're a super villain and your choices are, I could have my Mecha-Kong always have bombs or not. Go with bombs every time. Because if you're a villain, you're going to want to use those bombs on something. Like people attacking you, sending into the city. I
think they would reuse them. I would fully expect in a Hollywood movie, they would reuse these, and you would go, oh, so that's why they showed them to us earlier, so that he could use them now and not have to explain where they came from.
Well,
he only controlled Kong when he had him hypnotized with that little gadget. Once Kong decided, I don't want this on me anymore, which is, by the way, another really badass thing, that Kong is like, whoa, I am being hypnotized and manipulated with these gadgets on my head. I'm getting rid of these things right now. So once he can't control them anymore, then he can't be giving him bombs because he's going to use the bombs willy-nilly.
Mecha-Kong carried the bombs. He has a bandolier he wears around his waist, and it's full of grenades that he drops and digs tunnels.
Mecha-Godzilla had rocket launchers in his fingers.
Oh yes.
That's like Mecha-Godzilla is like loaded for bear, whereas like Mecha-Kong.
Well, Doctor Who has made Mecha-Kong for one purpose, which is that he's on a contract with Madam X, who wants him to dig up a whole bunch of this element X, and they need something big to dig tunnels and dig out this dangerous radioactive element. So naturally, he builds a giant robot.
Okay, see, there's where I think you're mistaken. If you don't build a giant mecha monkey. You don't build a giant mecha ape with the express purpose of drilling.
Well, you know what? This is why a regular scientist is ultimately probably better to have on your payroll than a mad scientist.
Right,
So
that's true.
You built the Mecha-Kong. So once Madame X says, "Okay, thanks for Element X," you're like, "So I keep the giant mecha robot with the bombs, right?" Sure, we already paid for that. Great. Now what? And then you make your plans.
See, the industrious Mads, and the industrious evil scientist would not be trying to use this to dig. He would say, "Hey, you want an army of giant robot gorillas? I'm your guy."
I think that's exactly it. Eventually, so you sell it as this is like, up salesmanship. You sell it as, well, he can climb down into the crevices and he can throw bombs. He's got, hands and feet, so he can climb like a monkey up and down. That's a great thing to have, right? Sure, cool. You're paying for that. You get released from your contract. Guess what? I now know how to make giant mechanical monkeys, apes. And who's going to stop me now? Because I've already built one.
Yep.
The answer to that is the real Doctor Who. We would have the John Pertwee Doctor Who battle this Doctor Who, and it would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for real. That's true. I should mention that Doctor
regardless that he doesn't use his bombs again.
This particular bad guy, Doctor Who, again, so named as a ripoff of James Bond's Dr. No.
I'm not completely convinced about that because he's costumed like William Hartnell, like right down to his wig.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Dr. like W.U., so I don't know.
Well, he looks totally different from the way he does in the cart. To your point, now I think he's dressed like a Japanese badass, like Captain Harlock. But he is not dressed like Doctor Who in the King Kong cartoon. Doctor Who in the King Kong cartoon wore a professor, like Felix the Cat style professor jacket. The one that buttons down the sides and everything. And so he dressed like Dr. Savannah. And wait, is that right, Dr. Savannah? Which is one is a worm.
You mean from Captain Marvel?
From the Captain Marvel universe, yeah.
Yeah, that's Dr. Savannah.
Yeah,
well,
he dresses like Dr. Savannah. He looks like Dr. Savannah. Anyway, in the movie, they recast him. And he's got the big white wig and the black outfit and stuff.
And some really un-Hollywood teeth.
Yes.
Also, sometimes you see it spelled as HU, meaning that he would probably be from China.
Interesting.
So
yeah,
that's also the possibility. And why he would be.
Well, okay, that brings up an odd question. That brings up an odd question. Does that make him a yellow peril villain created by actual Asian people?
It's possible. I mean, you could say that too, but there's a lot of back and forth between China and Japan, so wouldn't be outside the realm. Japan did.
If this were an American film, if this were an American film and it had starred like, I don't know, Barry Nelson or Vincent Price or something like that, and this was the bad guy, you would totally call it a racist yellow peril, bad guy. But who knows what's going on, in this film, because he's just a bad guy. He looks awesome, by the way. I mean, I think Doctor Who is a really cool bad guy.
To me, like
no, you're right. It might be about rivalry.
Madam X could just be from Neo, North Korea, as far as we know.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Okay, so just to recap, Giant Mecha-Kong is there to dig up Element X, and they're having problems with that, and so the next thing they decide to do is they're going to go kidnap the real Kong because the robot's not working out, and Doctor Who is like a fighter pilot in his way that he constantly adjusts his plans based on what he's seeing in front of him. So he's like, the robot Kong's not working out. I need to go grab the real giant gorilla. And so they go and they they get Kong, and I'm gonna let's sort of skip over a lot of this business, but what it really comes down to, you can call out what you find interesting, but he goes and he grabs Kong and he hypnotizes Kong to come try to dig some of the stuff out, and somewhere around here he
A
kidnaps.
giant jewel.
Yes, yeah, and he kidnaps our heroes, and he's keeping them, so that where this all will wind up is that Kong will break free, mainly because he knows that Susan is in danger.
So what you're saying is King Kong escaped.
King Kong
Exactly.
escapes.
That would make a great movie title.
Yes,
It would.
indeed.
They
Yes.
should-
Yeah, when he hears that Susan is being possibly tortured or threatened, he breaks all the bonds, he tears down the giant gate, he's gonna come get her. He gets away in the movie, because I want to skip to this. The movie takes Kong to Tokyo, where the finale of this film will take place, because the whole rest of the movie takes place in Tokyo for no purpose that I can recall. Kong goes to Tokyo, and they send Mecha-Kong to. Well, they both wind up in Tokyo. Who goes to Tokyo first? Does Mecha-Kong go to Tokyo
goes
first?
to Tokyo, and they send Mecha-Kong after him, and
Yeah.
Mecha-Kong picks up Susan and climbs this tower that looks like the Eiffel Tower, but isn't.
It's Tokyo Tower, which apparently looks like the Eiffel Tower. Pretty neat.
Yeah, Kong is there, and then he's kind of doing okay, and then Mecha-Kong just busts through all these buildings. Which, by the way, watching that, I thought that would be so freaking much fun, because it's clearly a guy in a suit just tearing through a bunch of miniature, not really that miniature. I mean, basically life. Basically chest high buildings. I thought that would be so much fun to do that.
I have this idea, and somebody's gonna steal it since I mentioned it here. Running a service where you have balsa wood buildings, and you have a party where you bring the suits in the balsa wood building and some non harmful firecrackers or little cat things. And then you just let people wrestle and destroy a city.
Yeah.
And there's your party. I'm obviously not an entrepreneur enough to do this, but I would love to make that. I just need investors, I suppose, because that sounds like an awesome party. By the way, total non sequitur, Jason, when you're talking about breaking the bonds and knocking down the gate to come get her, it sounded like you were constructing a prog song. Something Blue Extra Cultured sing, the delivery and how that sounded in my head. There's now this prog song about breaking down the gates and breaking the bonds to come for her. I don't know how the tune goes yet, but anyway.
Oh, dude, if you could write, that sounds like a Misfits idea. If you could write a song and people are like, oh, dude, this is actually technically a song about King Kong escapes for Rise from Fire to do. That would be so great.
But
yes, either one.
I don't know if I can get Rain to sing about a song about Kong. I mean, he does sing about sort of Dracula, but I think kaiju stuff is probably better suited for Deserts of Mars. But okay, so one thing that about Tokyo Tower, I don't know how recently it was built in comparison to the movie, but Godzilla himself has a history of destroying the latest, coolest thing that's in Tokyo. So if there's a cool new, if there's a giant, Ferris wheel, if there's a giant building, whatever the cool new building is, Godzilla is gonna wreck it. And so I need to look up when Tokyo Tower was completed, because this might have been following suit.
1958, it was completed. It was completed 11 years before this movie comes out.
Probably a little bit. I mean, I still think it's kind of trying to do that.
Oh wait, this is 67. Sorry, 9 years. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
So maybe it's too far away, but definitely that was a thing. My friend Hero was telling me about that, because I always thought, hey, look, that's cool. He's destroying something. He's like, no, that's the newest, coolest building.
That's cool.
Notice, that's what he's destroying. So my only disappointment is Mecha-Kong goes out like a chump.
Yeah. What happens with Mecha-Kong?
It climbs it, and that's supposed to be like King Kong. And so they're climbing the building, cool. And then he just kind of throws Mecha-Kong off, and he falls into pieces.
Yeah.
Cheap shoddy Kong.
I really wanted to see Kong just tear Mecha-Kong apart. I really wanted to see that. Just like to see, like grabs him by the arms and like if you could imagine Kong
I
like
just don't
standing.
think Doctor Who built him very well. I mean,
guess,
the
but
whole
I mean,
reason why they have to go get the real King Kong is that he doesn't work as well as he should.
But that's pretty
Like the
disappointing, don't you think? I mean, don't you
So
want to
what
see
you're
like Kong
What you-
tear Mecha-Kong apart? Like just stretch his arms out and just
I'm
tear him
kind of
into.
okay with the fact that they climb. I'm kind of okay with the fact that they like climb up something.
Like a
So,
fatality
I
at
loved
the
it.
end of
I loved it. I thought it
Mortal
looked great.
Kombat.
That
Hmm?
the climbing part, but imagine how much cooler it would have been if they actually fought more than just Kong thrown off. By the way, Drew, are you supposing that Doctor Who built the robot Kong from 70s Kong? Because also a terrible, yeah.
Yeah.
If you take away the fake fur that's on top of that Robo Kong from 70s Kong, you'll see Who Enterprises. And Diller is like, damn it,
Purveyor of fine
hired-
mechanical robot.
we should have never. I should have known. I've seen King Kong Escapes. I should have never hired Who Industries to build this for my movie. Oh,
I thought of that giant robot, which by the way did move its arm. The moment like for like 3/4 of a second when they show you that giant robot in the 1976 King Kong when he moves his arm, and I was thinking, well, it doesn't look like a living ape, but it looks like a scary as shit giant robot that somebody
yeah.
like
Who
put in
Industries
shape.
is scary and terrible on execution.
Yes.
I think Mecha-Kong looks great. I would love to have a model of Mecha-Kong on my desk.
I think
Yeah.
But
Hobbylink Japan probably has that.
yeah.
I wonder
But
if there are any Mecha-Kong
I
figures.
kind
I'd
of
love to
like.
see
I
them.
don't know why. I get where you guys are coming from. I kind of like the fact that Mecha-Kong's kind of a punk. Like that he's not really up to much. I sort of because like Mechagodzilla is a badass.
Mhm.
Like I kind of like the idea that Mecha-Kong is just like no matter what, he's always the inferior copy.
I'm disappointed. I hear you, but I still wanted to see a real fight, like something where you're excited, and at the end it's a fist pumping thing, and you feel good about the and
But
here
they haven't really
Kong
built
is
up that
lucky.
strong of a rivalry because we know from the get-go that Mecha-Kong kind of sucks because the first thing he does is break down.
His breakdown. That's
and
true.
then
That's
break
totally
apart
true.
in midair. I mean, when he falls off the thing, he just Kong
Yeah.
takes it like a personal victory, like that Mecha-Kong falls off the tower, breaks off the top piece of the tower, falls off and breaks up in midair, and then crashes to the ground in pieces. And then Kong's like, "Yes, I rule," and you're like, "That wasn't really so much you."
I do like that they sick Kong on Doctor Who's ship, though.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was
That's
awesome.
amazing. Hey, if you want to look, man, we're not going to stop you. If you want to rip ass on Doctor Who's ship and just
Well, but again, I feel like I don't like that he understands English and can hear so well. I would have preferred it if he would have seen the Doctor on the ship and been like, "Wait a minute, that's that jerk that was hypnotizing me," and then looked at
So wait.
Is it okay if I kill
you
that
have
dude?
a hard time in a movie with dinosaurs,
Yeah,
a
but for that, it
giant
would've been realistic.
gorilla, a robot giant gorilla, giant hypnotism, no less. But the fact that the gorilla understands English, that's what
But for that, it would be totally realistic to me. Yes.
I love that it's not as innocent. Tony says, that Kong, they're like, go ahead, Kong, you can tear up the ship. Susan, and I don't know if the movie's given it any thought, but I'm telling you, this is what's happening. Susan goes, Kong, get that ship.
no, that's what I'm saying. They give him they tell him, they just let him loose. Hey, Kong's gonna do what a Kong's gonna do. There's no at first thing maybe he's gonna get the ship. But
And
they
he
don't
jumps.
he never says, no, Kong, don't rip up the ship. They're just like And Kong's gonna do what Kong's gonna
Don't
do.
murder Doctor Who and everybody
Chicken.
else aboard that ship.
Yeah.
Chicken Kong.
Good.
I kind of like the fact that the heroes are ultimately kind of ruthless and pragmatic
Yeah.
in this
Well,
this family friendly monster movie.
Yeah.
he does. He did kill Madam X. So at that point,
Yeah.
and was gonna freeze. Freeze
Oh,
him to
he was
death
gonna
as
freeze
well.
burn Susan. Yeah. Well, no, he's bad. I grant you. But I mean, they could have, like, Batman would have said, Kong, go pick up that ship, carry it over here, and set it on the highway, and the police will surround the ship and will take Doctor Who away in chains. But no,
Well,
Kong
you didn't
goes.
call Batman. You called King Kong, and he's gonna rip a ship in two and sink it to the bottom of the sea, crew and all. Ta-da!
That's right. Kong just turns around. He's like,
Denzel was wrong. King Kong does have something on the police. Okay.
So what I like too is once he's through, I'm out of here, man. I'm gonna go. Those other islands I was saying.
Kong out.
Yeah.
We had to go back to his island so they could have Skull Island beach party.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And she calls him King Kong. This may very well be the only time King Kong is actually called King Kong in a movie, where she goes King Kong, and I love that. That just made my heart swell to hear her call him King Kong.
I thought it
That was
kinda
neat.
cheesy, but I'm with you.
It's totally cheesy. No, you can have heart swelling cheesiness. Absolutely.
That's-
Yeah, for sure. So that's King Kong Escapes. All right. Let us get our final thoughts on this amazing movie. So what order would you? It was Tony, Drew, Joya. So Tony, final thoughts on King Kong Escapes. What would you leave us with?
Oh, it's super fun, and I really enjoy this movie. You can get it for super cheap on Amazon too, and that's amazing. Although I still think it's a shame that we can't get the two Kong movies with subtitles. I really do. As
Yeah.
cool and fun as the dubs are, like I'm not a purist in that way, but I wish we had the option to see the originals of both of these. Just because we live in a world where those exist, and it's obvious that somewhere they're readily available. There's prints of them, right? Or at least digitized prints of these. I wish we could get original subtitled uncut versions. Maybe I'm in maybe they're not as fun. I don't know. But as a collector, I do think it's kind of crappy we don't have those.
Yeah, as a student of the forum, you should be able to see it. It's absolutely.
But the Blu-rays are cheap and they look great, and it's super fun movies. I love adventure movies. This one's gorgeous. It has giant ape versus dinosaurs, and he just tears it up. Sea monsters. There's a mechanical ape. It's all the good stuff. Femme fatales, mad scientists, cool ass submarines, a hover car. Oh man, all the things you would want in an adventure movie are there, and I think that's fantastic.
Beautiful. Drew, lay it on us.
Well, I mean, I think Julie is completely fair to call this a silly movie, but to me, it's silly in the right way. Like, I chuckled a lot while watching this, but I was entertained. I would gladly watch this movie again over a lot of other movies, and I'm glad we did this for the Kong retrospective. Although I do hope at some point, whenever we get around on the subject of giant monsters again, we do Son of Kong at some point. But I did really enjoy doing this movie. It really does remind me of like Fantastic Four in its way, like minus the superpowers, but like a lot of the aesthetic of this movie kind of reminds me of like the early Fantastic Four by Lee and Kirby. So that is like the sort of 60s stuff that I really go for.
Absolutely. Julia, what are your final thoughts?
The style, I mean, just seeing the great costumes and some of the neat sets, and even just, like I said, the cheesy miniature effects, that's a lot of fun. It's I don't know, it just kind of, it's of a time, and it really makes you connect with that time. But, it's not the deepest It's not the deepest movie. It's not like, I'm not gonna be pondering it much after this, being like, that was a really
It's not even as artful as some of the other
life.
songs that we've done.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lot of films that we've done over this many years that we've been doing this now that I've been like, whoa, that movie really made me think, and it's like this great metaphor for whatever, And this, I don't really see that here so much, but it's a fun film, and I'm glad we watched it.
So I really thought this was a trip. This is a movie that's obviously, it is a family film. If you're looking for something grim, it's not here. This is not a grim and gritty reboot of King Kong. This went in completely the other direction, but it is a lot of fun, and I'm glad that we watched it. Okay, let's do our endorsements, and just whatever's on your mind, and and if you want to say something about your feelings about saying goodbye to the King Kong retrospective, you're welcome to. But Tony, you got anything to recommend this week?
Let's see. Well, I think once again I'm going to recommend August Ragon's E.G. Tsuburaya Master of Monsters book. I think revisiting all of these special effects. He wrote a great book. It's amazing, and I think everybody, if you like this stuff, it should be on your shelf. So I need to put the link up again, so remind me of that. Purely self-serving. We've talked a lot about it. If you want to see what we've been doing with Rise from Fire, we have a YouTube channel, and I can post that as well. There's 3 songs up there now, all of which will be on the album. Eventually we have to capture Die by the Sword, which of course is written about Jason's comic. Sword of Dracula. So, which by the way, Jason, so Rain sings it now. I originally wrote it for a previous band.
Yeah.
And I was listening to her sing the lyrics when we were recording. And I said, did you write any of that? She's like, no, you wrote all the lyrics. I honestly must have just gotten in the zone and written those. I did not remember any of the turns of phrase or anything. I would have written, are you the quarry? Are you the prey?
Yeah.
And I guess so. So
yeah.
Kudos to past me for writing something I don't even remember writing.
Oh man, as soon as you have the video ready, please post it. Like any form of video. If you just like in any means of letting us hear it, we want to hear it.
It'll be like that song is going to be on the album.
Awesome.
If we get a good copy on video, of course. But there's 3 songs in there. We have, like I said, we have a Rise from Fire channel now on YouTube, and we'll be posting more stuff as we get closer to our CD release, which I assume will be in the summer. But definitely, check out my endorsement. Also, check out more monster movies that are fun and enjoy more movies. I just saw the guy who did the reboot of his grimdark reimagining of Power Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
Was like, yes, I would like to do a R-rated Mega Man. I'm like, no. We don't. Everything doesn't have to be grimdark. Just stop this crap. Like, I'm so glad there's a Kong versus there's this. King Kong escapes. Like, you don't have to see guts, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be the darker side of Gotham for every freaking thing. Like, enjoy some things. Just watch some fun stuff from time to time. I'm sorry that you didn't get a pony, and the real world's a terrible place full of darkness. Oh, look, I see. It's not like Batman's Batman. It's not Adam West Batman. That's not how reality happens. That's why we have entertainment. It's because I don't have to worry about friends getting cancer or, what happens, the reality of drugs when I watch movies like this. So go enjoy some stuff and try, if you can, not to support as much grimdark bullshit that people want to foist on you, because I think that there's a time and a place for it. Don't get me wrong, but this idea that now that the world is so awful that everything that entertainment has to be that, I think is bullshit. Give me King Kong Escapes. Most
beautiful. We've had so many chances on this show to talk about movies that are definitely of a tier where they're not to be taken seriously, and there's some of my favorite discussions. I mean, truly, I feel like my life is better for having spent some time enjoying Zombies of Moratau. Honestly, that movie I loved watching it, and I loved talking about it. It was, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, maybe people might call me hypocritical. I still think that you should go out. I know, like, Autopsy of Jane Doe is about to come out. It's dark and scary, and I love it. The Void, one of my favorite movies this past year. Great practical effects, lower budget movie, but really great. So I'm not saying that I don't enjoy. I mean, we do a horror movie podcast, of course. I enjoy dark things, but I think this idea of everything being that way, like I love that we live in this world where you can get a Technicolor 8 versus a mechanical 8 movie, and it's a family movie. How awesome is that? So I don't know. Go out and enjoy some of that too, in equal measure.
I think it's fabulous. Drew, what do you got?
Well, I've been enjoying a lot of things on Hulu. As I mentioned last week, I finally got a Hulu account, so I've been checking out some of the stuff on that. And one of the things that I've been enjoying a lot, which is Hellsing Ultimate, which is obviously it is another animated adaptation of the manga Hellsing, which is, simply put, English Protestant vampire hunters and their vampire minions fighting Catholic super soldiers, fighting vampire Nazis and werewolves. That's the plot. Oh yes, and the Helsing organization, which is the Van Helsing's family, kind of got, I guess, brought into the English government to be their anti-monster task force. They have Dracula as their brainwashed secret weapon that they sick on other monsters. He's still evil as shit. Like he's terrifying, but he's aimed in the right direction, which is fascinating because I like Machiavellian. I like Machiavellian heroes occasionally, so it's really fun to watch. The animation is really nice. I think it's probably a better animation than the previous Hellsing anime. I haven't watched the last episode, but you could know if you really hunkered down and did it. Like, the episodes are all about an hour long, but you could watch it all in a week. I have two selfish plugs I want to make. Number one, the new issue of Halloween Man is going to be out on Comixology on Wednesday. It's been a really long time since we've had an issue of the ongoing series. It's been since October, and I'm glad that we were able to finally get this thing out. I feel like this issue has been kind of hard and to come together for whatever reason, and it's the second part of the American Nightmare storyline, which centers around a satanic cult and how they're trying to manipulate the race for Texas governor. And
Awesome.
It's a fun story.
Awesome.
I think a lot of people will get something out of it. The other selfish thing that I'm going to plug tomorrow on horrormovies.net, I was able to do, by the way, thank you again, Jason, for the appropriate contact information. I was able to do a interview with the creative team for the Ghostbusters comic book series that IDW puts out. And, I've periodically plugged this series over the course of doing this podcast. I think it is the best adapted comic that has ever been made. Like, it actually, you can tell they really love the franchise, but they still add, they don't just vampire the mythology and just trade on your nostalgia love. They actually add to the mythology. This new series is called Ghostbusters 101, and it is actually a crossover between the original 80s Ghostbusters and the Ghostbusters from last year's Paul Feig Ghostbusters movie. So this should be interesting. I haven't actually read the comic yet, but I have no doubt that it's excellent from what I'm hearing from the Ghostbusters online fan community. So I was really, both of the guys are really nice, and I was really glad that they were going to sit down and talk to me about all things Ghostbusters. So it ended up being a really fun interview. So drop by horrormovies.net and check that out when you get a chance.
Fabulous. Julia, what do you have to recommend?
I don't remember if we talked about the new Mystery Science Theater 3000 last week.
Oh, we did. Remember, we debated it last week. Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, anyway, we've been enjoying watching the more binge watching it and seeing all the episodes. But yeah, I don't really have anything else new to plug at the moment, so I'll let you guys.
I mean, instead of an endorsement, because all I've been doing for the past week, other than occasionally watching episodes of MST3K, is I've been knee-deep in note cards. So I have an announcement to make, which is that I have to go on a sabbatical. I'm under contract to do 2 different books. One is a nonfiction book about tiki culture, which I've already been talking about on Facebook, and one is a middle grade adventure that I haven't even announced yet. But both of these things are due at Labor Day, and I can't both write those books and also host the show. So I have to take my leave, and I will be back. In theory, in September, and so I think you'll hear more episodes of the show. That's what it sounds like. It sounds to me like Drew, you're going to want to figure that out. But you'll be sans Jason. To the extent that anybody cares, fear not. I do intend to come back. I can't possibly write these books without taking the time off. So for that, I am truly sorry, and I'll miss everybody. I really will. So
We get it. Cool.
Yep.
We'll try to pull you back.
Spirit hug.
We'll be
So awesome. Okay. Gosh. If you're listening to the show, leave a review on iTunes. It helps people to find the show. Come around to the Facebook page and ask us questions. We will totally engage with you. If you want to yell at me for taking the summer off, I totally respect that, and I'll totally listen to that. And if you want to know,
No, you won't. You'll be busy writing.
True enough, but Drew will let me know if I need to come and address something. And you can look.
No, I won't. I will respect that you're busy writing, and I will deal with it myself.
So there we go.
Ignorance is bliss, Mr. Henderson.
Well, I'm putting the interview show on hiatus as well, actually. So I might just deactivate my whole Facebook. I don't know. I haven't decided yet whether I should just deactivate it or just not come around, except for once a week to check in and see what's going on. I don't know. So
I think that's probably do that.
Yeah. It's less stupidly dramatic than unplugging.
Turn off all the alerts. That's I see people all the time. We have this program Slack, and being in tech, I have to watch things because people write me all hours, and so I have to keep track of that. And people are always like, "I left this channel because it was giving alerts." Why? I have to watch this thing all the time. It's got an icon that shows you whether or not people have posted or not. I get emails. Just turn off all the whistles. It doesn't have to go ping pong, boop, none of that. I see these people who they act like if all of that isn't turned on, they might as well not even have the app or whatever.
Interesting.
It's crazy to me. It's flat out crazy. We live in this world where there's a switch on the side of your iPhone that turns all that crap off. There's a volume knob. There's a thing that says turn that off.
Yeah.
I am fascinated by this perception that it's like when people go, I get too many emails. That's what folders are for. It's really simple. I just get too many. I can't be on this thread, or I can't do this. Just turn all that shit off. It's weird how they feel they have to be connected and yet don't want to be connected. And that just it's hilarious and bizarre to me because all of it has a button that says don't do this anymore. And yet it still keeps an icon. You can go check it as much as you want or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
that's a really
fascinating dumb thing about technology.
I like your advice. Which is just turn off the notifications. Probably remove the app from my phone, and then periodically go check it on the PC and see if anybody's left me anything that I need to check on. And yeah. So anyway, but if you want to know what I'll be doing, I'm going to be filling out note cards and translating them into writing, and I'll be running around taking photographs of stuff. Julia bought me a bunch of tiki mason jars today, and I got to take some photographs of that. So it's going to be a busy summer.
Tiki,
Are you working on your Hawaiian shirt collection yet?
I have not. I don't have any Hawaiian shirts. Julia, get on that. Let's get some Hawaiian. Let's get some Hawaiian shirts going. Yeah.
By the way, Mondo has.
I'm expecting a Magnum PI mustache when I see you at
Right.
Oh, nice. Mondo has Tiki Gremlins cups, and they're gonna have Tiki Aliens cups. So
Nice.
Cool.
For horror Tiki, there you go. Also, when I went to Hawaii, I found it mostly on purpose, but I thought it would be funny and ironic that I came back from Hawaii with it ended up being black and white, but the only black Hawaiian shirt that I could find.
Awesome.
So people were expecting like, oh, you got a Hawaiian shirt, right? Yeah. And then when I came in with my Hawaiian shirt, and it was also black. It was like,
I would, Drew. I would do a Magnum PI mustache in a heartbeat, except for that as a blonde guy, I can't grow.
He looks more like a serial killer than Magnum.
It's sparse and horrible.
I was hoping you would say something like, except when I try, it only grows from my eyebrows. Like some kind of strange Hawaii, like.
Who was it that hold on. Speaking of this, who was it that you thought looked like Jason Henderson? I have Jamie in the room with me, by the way. Who was it you thought we were watching a movie and you thought somebody looked like Jason Henderson?
This is really funny because it's like at this point the audience is like, do they know that we're still here? Yes, we know you're still here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we just haven't ended it.
Okay.
Again, with technology, you can stop at any time.
Thank you very much.
It was like,
Yeah, we'll fix this in post. Is that what you're saying?
No.
You can click stop.
Oh, she thinks you look like the guy that plays Damien Dark on Legends of Tomorrow.
I'll take your word on that. I don't even know who that is,
What is that guy? He's the same guy that played one of the Howling blinking eye Dum Dum Dugan in the Captain America movie. So there you go, Jason.
Oh, that guy. I know that guy.
Your two comic book characters are in good company.
Sweet. I love Dum Dum Dugan. All right.
According to that, you can grow a sweet mustache. You can grow a sweet mustache. This can be done.
And a bowler hat. When we see people at Anime Fest in Dallas, maybe I'll be rocking a Aloha shirt and a bowler hat.
Dum Dum Dugan cosplay.
No, I'm saying combine them.
Yes.
Yes,
Damien
Dugan.
Yeah.
Damien Dugan.
All right. I should let it go there. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the people on the call, and thanks for the people who've been listening. And watch this space. We'll be telling you what's coming up soon. Have a fantastic week. Bye, all.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.